Hi, everyone, and welcome to XKDR's Big Ideas. Today, we have with us Mr. Rahul Ahluwalia, the founding director of Foundation for Economic Development, a New Delhi-based non-profit that works on opportunities in economic growth in India. Rahul has spent a lot of time doing policy in India at places such as Niti Aayog. All in all, he's been a big thinker about big ideas, and today we're going to pick his brain on something called special economic zones or SEZs. So I'll begin. Rahul, I think this is a timely discussion given the manufacturing push in India, the diversification of supply chains from China. And when we think about SEZs, they've existed for a long time, right? Since the Industrial Revolution, industrial clusters have existed. Why do they remain important today? What do you think are the benefits they bring? And what do you think they do for emerging economies like India?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Niharika. I think, first of all, let me quickly disambiguate, as Wikipedia calls it, right? We are not talking right now about SEZs as the Indian system understands them, because we have this SEZ Act of 2004, I think, but we definitely, because it was an attempt at replicating China's success using special economic zones, which did not work out. We want to talk about the concept of special economic zones. Some people think of them as charter cities, some people think of them as special clusters, right? So the reason clusters, first of all, are important is the standard, what economists call the benefits of agglomeration, right? Is that when people set up near each other, all of them get benefits, right? So you'll often find that industries tend to set up together, right? At the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, Manchester is where everyone was, right? Later in the 20th century, Detroit is where all the car manufacturers were, right? And this happens because of very fundamental sort of economies of scale that build up, right? Like whatever infrastructure a car company requires is common across car companies, right? So you shouldn't want to have, let's say, lots of workers living nearby, right? So workers can be fungible across car companies. You want roads that can take your cars out, right? So again, fungible across car companies. And the more car companies you have that are utilizing your infrastructure, the better it is. The infrastructure is more efficient, all of that, right? So there are very fundamental reasons why these clusters happen. And early on in history, these were mainly organic, right? Like some guy finds some location to be suitable, sets up, other people quickly catch on or want to piggyback on that success, and they cluster around that region and it grows. I think what China in particular did, right? They started the special economic zone concept, which is to say, okay, we've got this whole country, we are going to carve out one small part of it, small, but actually 300 square, 400 square kilometers, which is about the size of a medium-sized city, right? And they say, okay, in this area, we are going to completely overturn what is happening in the rest of the country, right? We are going to allow foreigners in, we are going to suspend all labor law, we are going to suspend all environmental issues, right? We're just going to say, okay, this place is open for business, come invest, do whatever you want here, right? And that model proved to be spectacularly successful, right? Just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about, they started special economic zones in Shenzhen, right? It was one of the first. They had 4. Today, that greater Bay Area, as it's called, Pearl Delta, Shenzhen, a few sort of cities around it, which is only about 0.6% of China's land area by mass. It contributes 35% of China's total exports, right? That's, to put it in Indian scale, it's about 1/3 of our entire GDP, right? So special economic zones as a concept allowed the Chinese to do this, right? So, and to us, why it remains super relevant is now, like you said, we are trying to make a manufacturing push, right? And there are many very important reasons why manufacturing hasn't worked here. special economic zones offer us a chance to fix that.
A small question on China. I was going to ask you, what are some global examples that work? Are there some apart from China? The reason I'm curious about that is because with China, a lot of times there's a rule of law versus efficiency trade-off. So I wanted to know if there are other examples.
So there are, again, plenty of examples, but they don't fit exactly the same kind of model. Singapore, all of Singapore is a sort of special economic zone in some sense, right? They will have its charter city. Hong Kong, again, right? Like proximity to China, uh, rules and laws that are very, very different. Vietnam most recently has been doing something similar. It's not exactly the same, but something similar in the sense that they've divided the country into economic regions. What they call the Northern Key Economic Region is where they've boosted electronics manufacturing and electronics exports in particular. And Vietnam is a tiny country relative to us. Their overall export is almost exactly the same as ours. So there are global examples that exist other than just China. China is the most famous and the most successful one.
And coming back to India, what do you think is holding us back? What are the issues, regulatory policy in India?
Okay, so there's two aspects to this. One aspect is the broader ecosystem competitiveness challenges that are holding us back. And then there's one specific to special zones that's holding us back, right? I think so. The broader ones are quite well known, but generally, I think we are not competitive across a number of different things, right? So, and most of them have to do with how we govern ourselves, right? So, when we take, let's say, labor as a factor of production, right? We have a lot of labor, right? We are for any country, we probably have, I think our working age population is slightly lower than China's, but at some point it's pretty soon it's going to go above China, right? But we make it very difficult for firms to employ labor, to work with labor, and to let labor go, right? So the general flexibility. And because we think we are protecting labor, right? But instead of protecting them, we're actually keeping them away from jobs, because when you make the ability to contract and employ labor so difficult, most people don't want to employ labor. So in labor, there's a whole bunch of things we do that makes us very uncompetitive, right? So that's why jobs are the number one problem. In land, again, right, it's a factor that we make it very difficult to use. We don't have good titling or registration systems of who owns land, how do we transfer ownership of land, right? So land transactions are very difficult, which is why often industry wants government to do the land transaction instead of getting into land transactions themselves, right? And when government gets involved, the transaction becomes extremely inefficient, typically. So that's land, right? Once you have the land, building on it is extremely difficult. So there's a long list of these things. If you add it all up, overall businesses say that it's about 20 odd % more expensive to do business in India than it is anywhere else, right? And this is just factors of production. Then there's a whole bunch of ease of doing business and policy uncertainty issues that we have, right? You never know when a new ministry will issue a new order that completely turns your business model on its head, right? This is incredibly bad for investment. And the special economic zone thing, right? Now, the promise is, okay, you've got these long laundry list that just makes you feel, okay, if you've got all of these problems, we're never going to fix them, right? And it's not like you can fix any one problem. All of the others are still impossibly bad. The promise of special economic zones is that you can let the solution happen for all of these problems, but in some areas. It's the new movie, right? Like you can't solve everything everywhere all at once, right? So you don't try to solve everything everywhere all at once, but you do have to solve everything. You just solve it in a relatively contained area, right? So that's, I think, the general promise of the special economic zone area.
And is the idea is that there will be spillover the local economy? Is that the broader idea? And does the the state have to play a role in sort of enabling that?
Yeah. So, like I said, one, you don't even necessarily need spillovers to justify the scale. Even if the zone is large enough, even within that zone, the scale can be enormous, right? And so just the people who directly move to that zone, work in that zone, earn in that zone can number in millions, right? But of course, there are spillovers, right? Like uh, the other aspect of this, and this is also a little part of what role the state has to play in it, right? Um, the other aspect of this is that it allows you a way to experiment with bold action in relatively limited ways, right? Um, we need bold action, right? We know all of these problems exist. Our state needs to take bold action. But common sense dictates that you don't want to take drastic steps across the entire country in a whole bunch of different things. Uh, if you're being politically sensible, or sorry, if you're being sensible from a policy perspective, you don't want to do it. You never know there are all kinds of unintended consequences out there. And it's politically very risky. So anyway, a politician doesn't want to do it. So this, again, it offers the ability to experiment, the ability to take bold steps without upsetting the apple cart of the entire country, all the vested interests that exist. So the role for the state and the regulator, right, is you have to create an enabling framework that allows for something like this to exist, and then try experimenting with it, right? To say, okay, look, I won't get it right in the first place, right? Let's say I make a law and set up a zone. We've done it, by the way, now with Gift City to some extent, right? Where the role for the state is, okay, I'm trying it. I see what's working and what's not, and then I try and fix what's not working here, right? And that gives me some sense of why it's not working. Like one example of an idea is you've set up this zone, you've allowed it to set up new regulators, etc. A big risk is that the new regulator is going to recreate all the problems of the old regulator, right? Because it's essentially the same system, right? It's essentially similar bureaucrats, similar capacity. So, okay, what do you do then? Maybe one approach could be, can we try and get some involvement of the private sector in doing this, right? So, and to some extent, with some of our industrial clusters, we are trying that, right? So our developers, we do give tracts of land to developers to say, okay, you develop the infrastructure, give it out to industry. Can we increase the participation there in the governance itself of that zone, right? So the approvals, the clearances, all of that becomes easier.
And you'd say these are the short-term things that we can look forward to. In the long run, you've said factor market reforms would be the way to go.
Absolutely, right? And I think here again, this can be very beneficial, right? We should think of this not as an alternative, but a stepping stone, right? It's a petri dish where you can try out a factor market reform and you can point people to it and say, hey, look, we did the factor market here, right? Not only did the sky not fall down, the workers have done great, it's been good for the country as a whole, etc. Right? So it helps you build the case for factor market reform in the long term as well.
This was a really helpful discussion as India moves forward and thinks about policy reform, big policy reforms. SEZs seem like the way to go. Thank you so much for talking to us about it.
No, thank you.